The village had been abandoned for decades, yet tonight, someone, or something, was walking through its foggy streets, calling his name. The shadows whispered secrets no one should ever hear, and he was already too late to turn back. Malcolm stepped cautiously onto the cracked cobblestones of Eldridge Hollow, the fog curling around his ankles like icy fingers. The village had been abandoned for decades, yet the air felt heavy, almost alive, pressing against him with the weight of 1,000 silent eyes. Every house leaned as if observing, its broken windows hollow and accusing. He gripped his backpack strap, forcing himself forward. Curiosity had anchored him here, stronger than fear. Stories had followed this place for generations. Travelers disappearing, flickering lights in empty windows, whispers drifting through the mist. Nearby villagers called it cursed, warned that no one who entered ever returned the same. Malcolm had ignored them. A scholar of folklore, he believed in the unseen, the unsolved, and tonight, the hollow promised both. A chill crawled up his spine. The fog shifted unnaturally around a toppled street lamp, coiling as if alive. Then he heard it, a whisper, soft but unmistakable, carrying his name. Malcolm, he froze, eyes scanning the gray haze. No one was there, yet the voice came from everywhere at once. He shook his head. Imagination, he told himself. But the fog was thick, damp, pressing against his face and muffling every sound except that impossible whisper. A shadow flickered across the corner of his eye, gone when he turned. The ground beneath him felt alive, uneven in rhythm, as if the village itself were breathing. A metallic tang stung his nose, iron, old and bitter. His heartbeat quickened. Step by step, he forced himself forward toward the village square. The fountain at its center appeared through the mist, dry and cracked, its carved faces eroded by decades. Yet it seemed alive, pulsing faintly, its shadows writhing like dark water. Then the whisper returned, clearer, insistent. "You shouldn't be here." The sound bounced from the windows, the walls, the fog itself. Malcolm's stomach clenched. Every shadow seemed to lean toward him. Every beam of broken wood pointed, warning, observing. And then he heard it, footsteps behind him. One step, pause. Another, deliberate, slow, in rhythm with his own. Malcolm spun, heart hammering. Empty street. Nothing moved. Yet the weight of eyes, unseen, pressed against him, patient, calculating, waiting. He swallowed hard and forced himself to move. One step, then another, until the shadows stretched longer. The fog thickened, and the whisper returned, cruel and unyielding. "Malcolm, come closer." He realized then that crossing the threshold into Eldridge Hollow had sealed his fate. Something watched him, something that had waited decades for an intruder, and it would not let him leave. Malcolm's steps echoed unnaturally loud against the cobblestones as he moved deeper into the village. Every turn of the street seemed to stretch impossibly longer than before, twisting into alleys he didn't remember passing. The fog thickened, curling around him in ghostly coils, carrying whispers that weren't quite words but felt like warnings. He could swear one hissed, "We see you." A sudden rustle made him spin. Shadows clung to the edges of the broken houses, moving independently, twisting unnaturally like dark smoke. His stomach churned. His rational mind insisted it was a trick of the fog, yet the weight of being watched pressed on him like iron chains. Every instinct screamed to run, but where could he go? The village had no exit. He reached the village square again. The fountain, dry and cracked, pulsed faintly with shadows pooling at its base. He squinted, seeing them shift, grow taller, reaching outward. The whispers grew louder, layering on top of each other until they formed sentences that scraped along his mind. "You cannot leave. You belong." Malcolm's breath came in ragged gasps. He forced himself to step closer, heart hammering, every nerve screaming in protest. One of the shadows seemed to detach from the pool, slithering across the cobblestones toward him. It moved like liquid darkness, but for a split second, he saw the outline of a face, pale, hollow, with eyes like empty wells. He stumbled backward, tripping over a stone, and hit the wall of a collapsed house. The shadow paused, then reformed. Advancing slowly, Malcolm's hand shook as he raised a flashlight. The beam caught the figure for only a moment, revealing fingers long and writhing, like serpents, reaching toward him. A sudden screech split the fog, a sound that was not human. Malcolm's pulse skyrocketed. He turned to flee down an alley, but the village twisted again. The streets that had led him to the fountain now folded back on themselves, leading him in circles. Every alley ended in walls, broken doors, or more shadows. He realized with a sickening clarity the village was alive, moving around him, feeding on his panic. Then he saw her, Marianne. She stood in a doorway, pale as moonlight, motionless, yet somehow impossibly close. Her eyes were dark voids, reflecting nothing, yet Malcolm knew they were fixed on him. She tilted her head, and in the stillness, a whisper came from her lips, though no sound left her mouth. "You shouldn't have come here." The shadows reacted instantly. They surged from the edges of the fog, rushing toward him in a wave that made the ground tremble. Malcolm stumbled backward, nearly falling into the fountain. The whispers became screams, echoing through the empty streets, the voices of countless lost souls trapped within the village. Every instinct screamed escape, but he could not. Every path twisted back toward the square. Every shadow mirrored his movements, anticipating his flight. His mind spun, reality bent and blurred. The fog thickened until he could barely see his own hands. Somewhere close, Marianne's presence hovered, unyielding. And then the whisper became different, closer, behind his ear, intimate, cruel. "Malcolm, come closer. You belong to us." His knees buckled. He was no longer a visitor. He was prey, and the village had begun to hunger. Malcolm's lungs burned as he fled through streets that no longer made sense. The village twisted and stretched, alleys bending like living things, doors vanishing only to reappear behind him. Every turn led him back to the square, back to the fountain pulsing with shadows that seemed to writhe toward him hungrily. Pressed his back against a crumbling wall, trying to catch his breath. The whispers had multiplied, surrounding him. They were no longer outside. They were inside his mind, echoing memories that weren't his. His childhood fears, his secrets, his guilt. Every hidden thought dragged into the open, whispered back to him with cruel delight. "You cannot leave. We see everything. You are ours." A shadow slithered along the wall, unnaturally fast, dissolving into the fog before he could see it fully. His flashlight flickered, revealing glimpses of figures standing at impossible angles, faces contorted in silent screams. He blinked, and they were gone. Only the fog and the whispers remained. Then he heard her voice. Marianne, not outside this time. Inside, every nerve screamed that she should not exist here. And yet, her hollow eyes were fixed on him from everywhere. She did not move, and yet every shadow around him reacted as if she commanded them. The shadows were alive, but she was the reason. Malcolm staggered, feeling the ground tilt beneath him. The streets themselves seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. He tried to run, but his legs refused. The shadows mirrored every movement, cutting off escape. Panic clawed at his mind, twisting time and space. One alley stretched endlessly. Another led to a wall that hadn't been there before. A mirror leaned against the crumbling wall, tall and cracked. He saw his reflection, but it was not him. Pale, hollow-eyed, screaming silently. Behind the reflection, Marianne's face hovered, lips moving in a wordless chant. Malcolm stumbled back, and the reflection smiled at him before he could move. That smile, it was him, but not him. The fog thickened, a living shroud pressing against his chest. The whispers rose to a scream. "You belong to us, forever." Malcolm's vision blurred. The streetlights flickered, and the shadows crept closer, their forms more defined. Fingers like smoke, faces emerging and vanishing, reaching for him. Every instinct screamed to flee, but every path led back into the square. He realized with a cold certainty that he was no longer in a place where logic applied. Eldridge Hollow did not merely trap bodies. It trapped minds, bending reality, devouring the soul, leaving the husk behind. And now it had noticed him fully. He was prey, surrounded, hunted by every whispered name of the village's long-lost victims. A hand grazed his shoulder, cold, solid, impossible. He spun, and Marianne stood there, closer than before. Eyes like black holes. Come closer, her whisper, intimate, cruel, final. The shadows surged, pressing in, reflecting his terror, multiplying it. He realized he could scream until he was hoarse, but nothing would hear him. Nothing outside existed. Only the village, only the whispers, only the hunger. And Malcolm knew, with the dread that rooted him to the cracked cobblestones, that whatever came next would leave him changed, or gone entirely. Malcolm ran blindly, but the village no longer obeyed the rules of space. Streets twisted into impossible angles, alleys looping back into themselves, doors disappearing into walls. The shadows surged around him, thickening the fog until it felt like he was wading through darkness itself. Every whisper, every scream from unseen mouths, echoed in his skull, hammering at his mind. Ahead, the fountain loomed larger than memory, pulsing like a heartbeat. Shadows spilled from it, writhing upward, forming shapes too horrible to describe. Faces with mouths sewn shut, limbs bending at unnatural angles. Eyes staring through him, through everything. He staggered backward, panic clawed at his lungs. He could not breathe. Marianne appeared suddenly, emerging from the shadows as if she had always been there. Her hollow eyes pierced him, unblinking, her pale hand stretching toward him. "You cannot leave. Not now, not ever." Her voice was no longer a whisper. It was a chorus of the dead, layered and unyielding. Malcolm's flashlight fell to the ground. The beams skittered across the cobblestones, illuminating glimpses of the unseen horror. Fingers made of smoke reached for him. Faces emerged from the fog. Shadows slithered along walls, twisting and laughing. Every step he took, the village shifted, folding the streets, bringing him closer to the fountain, closer to the entity that had been waiting decades. His mind screamed, trying to fight the creeping certainty that he was already lost. He pressed his back to a wall, every shadow converging on him, whispering every fear he had ever held. And then he saw it, a mirror propped against the fountain's base, tall and blackened at the edges. He knew without knowing how. If he looked, he would see the truth. With trembling hands, he leaned toward it. His reflection shimmered, then twisted. Pale, hollow-eyed, screaming silently. Behind the reflection, Marianne's face hovered, lips moving without sound, eyes empty, yet burning into him. He stumbled backward. The shadows surged into the mirror, then exploded outward, engulfing him in darkness. A cold, suffocating weight pressed against his chest. His limbs felt heavy, his thoughts thick, and then he felt it, something crawling under his skin, slithering into him, taking him apart piece by piece. Every scream he imagined left him silent. Every heartbeat pounded as the entity merged with his body, leaving him alive, but no longer himself. The last thing Malcolm saw before darkness swallowed him entirely was Marianne smiling, impossibly close, whispering one final word, "Forever," and then silence. The fountain's water did not move. The shadows rested once more in the fog. The village square lay quiet, as if it had never been alive. Only the whispers lingered faintly, drifting through the streets, calling out names that had long been lost, waiting for the next intruder to cross the line. Morning never truly came to Eldridge Hollow. The fog thinned, but the light that slipped between the trees felt weak, pale, unwilling to touch the village for long. Cracked rooftops glistened with cold moisture. The fountain in the square stood silent again, its stone faces empty and expressionless, as if nothing had happened the night before. But something had changed. A figure now stood near the fountain. Malcolm. He did not move. He did not breathe. Not in any way that felt human. His posture was calm, almost peaceful, yet his shadow stretched in impossible directions, clinging to walls and broken doors like black veins. The fog gathered around him as if it recognized its own. Slowly, his eyes opened. They were no longer his. Where fear once lived, there's only depth, dark, endless, watching. The village stirred in response. Shutters creaked. Shadows slid gently across stone. Eldridge Hollow welcomed its newest keeper. Far beyond the trees, a narrow road curved past the forgotten land. By late afternoon, a traveler approached, a man with a pack over his shoulder, tired from miles of walking. He had heard rumors of abandoned places worth photographing, old villages frozen in time. When he saw the fog resting in the valley, curiosity tugged harder than caution. He stepped closer. The air changed instantly. The forest went silent. Even the wind pulled back. "Strange place," the traveler murmured. From within the mist, a voice answered softly, warmly, almost kindly. "Are you lost?" The traveler froze. A man stood at the edge of the village street. Tall, still, watching. His face looked calm, familiar somehow. Yet something in his eyes felt wrong. Too deep, too empty, like wells that had never seen light. I didn't think anyone lived here," the traveler said. The man smiled. "Not many do, but some stay." The fog curled around the traveler's boots. The village seemed closer than it should be. Houses leaned inward. Streets stretched gently, invitingly. "What's this place called?" the traveler asked. The man paused, then answered softly, "Eldridge Hollow." The traveler hesitated. A cold instinct whispered for him to leave. Yet curiosity pressed harder. "Is it safe?" For the first time, something flickered behind the man's eyes. Not human thought, but memory. Shadows shifted behind him. Whispers drifted through broken windows. The man leaned forward slightly and said in a voice that carried more than one breath, "Once you step inside, the village remembers you." The fog thickened. The traveler felt his heartbeat slow, his thoughts grow heavy. Somewhere deep in the streets, the fountain pulsed again. Shadows began to move, and from the mist, more voices joined the first. Soft, patient, hungry. "Come closer." The traveler took one step forward, and Eldridge Hollow smiled. No one ever truly leaves Eldridge Hollow. Travelers speak of it in hushed tones, passing warnings from one generation to the next. Those who enter never speak again of what they saw, except in whispers that drift on the wind. And sometimes, just sometimes, a shadow moves in the corner of a streetlight, watching, waiting, calling your name. If you think the hollow has let you go, think again. Stay with us and see who, or what, lurks in the shadows next.